Hello, everybody. Welcome to Good Morning, Good Night, episode 14. My name is Matt Demers. I'm here with my friend Will Cho. We talk about life and esports and all the lovely topics in between. Mostly lately, it's been an RPG podcast because I think me and Will are
Yeah.
both just down that hole. Will, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Like you said, I am definitely deep in the RPG rabbit hole, very 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 deep. But otherwise, I was just I'm in Korea. For those who might be tuning in new to the podcast, just chilling day in day out. Nothing's changed too much. I started a new show. I hinted at it on last week's podcast.
Yeah, I saw.
But
Congratulations.
I can talk about it now openly. Yeah, thank you. I have a new show on the T1 platform. For those who don't know, T1 is a esports brand, and they have some of the best teams in various games. So that's cool. We talk about League of Legends in Korea. So hopefully we can have more fun with that. But that's been about the only big change.
I'm very curious about T1, mostly just because like both them and Genji. I know it's generation. I know it's Generation G, but it's
Yeah.
like it's the weird English ism of like those two G sounds together.
Well, and also we've had recent characters named Genji
Yeah,
in gaming.
I don't know. That's what I was thinking. I'm like, okay, is it? I don't want to say is it an anime reference, but like that seems like a word that I've said before. But between them two, I'm very interested in them because they seem to be westernizing as a brand or like reaching out to more Western audiences. And like Genji picked up when Genji picked up a COD roster before the franchise happened. I was like, what? Like.
Yeah.
What?
Genji, COD, T1 picked up Smash players.
Yeah, T1 picked up Smash players. They have like
then,
Apex, I think, and other games like that.
Yeah, they have Apex. T1 was one of the first to officially pick up like a Valorant roster in North America, and they did it before like establishing something in Korea. They have. They've spoken about wanting to continue developing stuff on both ends. Genji has like a lot of streamers based in North America. It is very cool to see. I've talked about it a couple of times on my stream as well, and I would say Genji and T1. I mean, they're about the only ones really pushing it, but they're also doing it very successfully in terms of, like you said, starting with roots. Both of them with roots in Korea, and both of them have taken slightly different directions in terms of how they've expanded and rebranded. But I think they've been doing very well, and like you said, like the decisions they are making indicate that they intend to research and try to do it right. Like when you're committing to a Call of Duty roster to try to get into North America, like it's like, okay, you mean this, right? You're not just forcing another team in a scene that doesn't exist or something like that.
How is Kingdom Hearts? Will, you've been playing Kingdom Hearts and you've committed to the long haul.
Yeah, for those who don't know, I've been streaming a lot of different JRPGs. I say different, but actually pretty much just the Final Fantasy series, and now starting Kingdom Hearts. The unique aspect being that like I didn't grow up with a lot of varied JRPGs, specifically because I never owned like a PlayStation console, which many of these were originally on. So it's been a journey. And then I've recently started Kingdom Hearts, the very first one. I have not, and Matt, I had a moment. Well, I had a couple moments. I had one early on when I discovered that. I'm going to speak comfortably, by the way, about any potential spoilers, because while I am blind to it, this game has been out for quite some time now, so I think it's okay. But I didn't know that you could get, you got different keyblades as weapons, throughout the game. It was just, small things like that. I guess that I realized that's how little I, looked into this game, and mostly because I was like, I'm never going to play it because I don't have a PlayStation, right? So I was like, I don't have a PS2, I don't have a PS3, and back then I didn't have a PS4 for the longest time. And so I guess it was just one of those things where I was like, yo, this is really cool that they're making this game with Disney. And back then I didn't even know that the second cool aspect of it was that it was like Disney crossover with Final Fantasy. To me, it was just like, oh, it's like a Disney JRPG. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then in my head, I was like, all right, the end. Like, that's super cool, but it is not relevant to me because I don't own a PS2. So,
Do you wiki
and then
dive at
so now
all
I'm just discovering.
for things that you're
I
like
don't
really interesting?
really.
You don't like cruise wikis just to be like, okay, I've seen this interesting looking character, I want to read more about them?
I only do it when it pertains to a job.
Okay, that makes sense. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I figured that.
No, it's okay. No, I think it's a valid question, which is actually partly why I find it so amusing when you tell me about how you've like looked up all this stuff about something you're interested in. Because, I mean, I guess certain things I'm very interested in, but generally, I say when it pertains to a job because generally it's when I have like when I want to accomplish something with it versus just like getting to know it, right? So for instance, like I've looked up stuff with like coding or back before I started working like as a student, like video production and things like that. I've researched that stuff, but that's because I wanted to like utilize it. Whereas with this game, I was like, I just grew up as a Nintendo kid. We never owned more than one console. I was like, this is just never gonna enter my life. So I'll see it in the headlines. I've like watched the trailers because I thought they were cool. I've looked at the box art, but that was it. I was like, okay, like really cool game. Unfortunate I can't play it. But move on with my life, right? So I knew nothing going in, and if you're wondering, like I'm near, I can only assume I'm near the end where a bunch of the crazy like twists and reveals happen, and I'm just like I guess it was the same with Final Fantasy VII when we got to the scene where Aerith dies, and I was like, how did I not really know about this for like 20 plus years, and in Kingdom Hearts' case 18 years? I'm like, I don't know. I just, because I've heard, for instance, both with Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts, they're both seeped so deep into like gaming culture and references, right? They both have such large audiences, and so I've like I was reading all these tweets about like Kingdom Hearts 3, for instance, when it was about to come out, and so I'm obviously very exposed to it, but at the same time I'm like not. It's this weird feeling. So
it's almost like if you read a spoiler for something that you're not really interested in, it doesn't really sink into your brain, and then like it's very easy to kind of like if this is a bad example because I'm actually really interested in the Persona games, but if Persona 5 came out and if Persona 5 came out, or like maybe The Last of Us is probably a good example. I've never been interested in either of those games. So reading Last of Us 2 spoilers doesn't feel like a spoiler to me because I've already have it in my head that I'm never going to play those games. So
you just read it and you move on.
Read it, move on. Maybe that's even a bad example because that's like a newsworthy example recently. But
sure.
Even with Kingdom Hearts, I played the first Kingdom Hearts game as part of the HD collection, and then I was like,
okay,
I'm not in this. Like, I'm not attached to this. I don't really care about the story. It's not hooking me. So I don't really care about... I tried to play a little bit of Chain of Memories, and I was like, oh, card-based game. I don't really want to do this. And then I fell off of it really hard. But, like, even Kingdom Hearts 3, it's like I haven't purposely avoided spoilers, but I haven't absorbed them either. But I get what you're saying with like certain iconic games or certain games that you are very prevalent in fandom anyway, where you hear people talking about them a lot and you see them talked about a lot, and you're kind of like, well, I'm not absorbing like everything. I wouldn't be able to tell you what the Kingdom Hearts plotline is via osmosis.
Sure,
you still have to experience it.
Well, I think with Kingdom Hearts, what I did know, and I think the whole world knows, is Kingdom Hearts is supposed to be a very convoluted story. So I guess the story part is one thing, but it's for instance, if so let's look at like God of War on PS4. Okay. So I played that last year, very very late. But I never played any of the God of Wars before, but I had seen so many of like the moves or the weapon, the different weapon, and like the game mechanics, because people were so enthralled with it because they thought it was so cool. So it was like all over Twitter, it was all over like Reddit gaming, it comes up all the time, and like people do like fan art and cosplay, and so you're very exposed to this. And I guess I was just like, for instance, like I didn't know Disney characters were summons in Kingdom Hearts, and in my head I'm just like, how did I never come across this? Although now I'm thinking about it, maybe it's just because I like didn't browse Reddit back in 2002. Maybe that's what it is.
Well, I think that's about the difference. Sorry, yeah, that could be it. I don't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I was just about to say, I think it's that now that I'm talking about it, I guess the internet just wasn't as readily available and expansive back then. I kind of forget that. I guess that's part of it as well.
So for me in high school,
it's weird.
So for me in high school and in probably late elementary, when I really started to like spend more time on the internet, I knew I wasn't going to have access to playing a lot of games because my family wasn't very well off. So, but I would read GameFAQs a lot because they're like, actually, sorry, thinking back on this, this actually makes a lot more sense. Is that I learned to read on Nintendo Power magazines. So like when my dad got a Super Nintendo when it launched with Mario Worlds, and I want to say that bundle was like 92-ish, and it came with a subscription to Nintendo Power. So with that in mind, we just kept getting those magazines, and that's how I learned to read. But it's also a factor of like I read about games that I have had no way of playing, especially like Super Nintendo games. And the funny thing is now that I'm savvy enough to to emulate games, I'm looking at these games that I've been like wanting to play my whole life, so to speak, where I'm like, oh man, that looks cool, and I know things about the game. I've never played it before. And then you play it and you're like, wow, this is actually really lame. This game sucks. But when I found out about GameFAQs, which is gamefaqs.com, which is like
I mean, this is still going, just not. It's
still going, just not as essential. Now that YouTube is a bigger deal, now like that's the thing. But GameFAQs was just, I still use it because I like written guides more than I like video guides.
It was an art. It was a piece of art, like the really well written guides.
Yes, like I'll go into this in a second, but I would read games that I was interested in, and then sometimes when I would go over to a friend's place and they had picked up something, or we're playing a game for the first time, I would know things about the game before they did, and they were like, "You don't own this game. Why do you know this thing?" And I'm just like, I was bored and really like to read. So the same thing happens with like, anime wikis or that kind of stuff. Is that I'm really bad for it, and I will spoil things that I'm interested in because I want to read more details about like a specific character. That sucks, but for me, I've definitely made tweets in the past about I love players guides. Players guides are an art in their own, and the same thing with GameFAQs. Documents. It's different because GameFAQs documents are like the indie music of those kind of things because no one's getting paid, and you have to do it because you're that passionate. And that if it's some obscure game and there's only one fact, that's the game that probably defined some kid's childhood. And even if it was just some crappy shovelware, whatever, that game meant something to that person enough that they played it to figure out the RNG mechanics to some dumb mini game, and they wrote a fact about it. And that person may never get any kind of public thanks. That person may never get any retweets for it. That person may never get any kind of money. And that's something that's changed with YouTube and Twitch and that kind of stuff, where why would you ever make a giant .txt like text file guide anymore when you could do it with YouTube and put it thing. And I'm not saying that it's corrupted and it's not pure anymore and this sucks, we should go back to text guides, but at the same time it's very like I think it's still special, and I still think it's something that you can observe what the culture of it was about and why it felt different and more authentic, if that makes sense. We've all definitely been looking for something on YouTube and it's a 10-minute video for a 2-second question, and you're like, okay, well, gotta fast forward through the hey guys, blah blah blah, welcome to my channel,
subscribe.
Like, subscribe. You're like, okay. I saw a law on the internet once where it was like, the first 30% of a video can usually be skipped. Or like I don't know if the law was specifically for like answering a question or whatever, but yeah, that's why I like written guides, and that's why I like game facts, and especially like I've been debating starting collecting like old players guides, because I think there's a certain art to them, because if you're writing a player's guide and publishing it for money, you have to have the game, like the company's okay. And that usually means you're getting art assets from them, or hacking the game in a way that you have actually like really good maps and stuff like that. So you're seeing art that you don't see in the game. You're seeing art that you may not see in the manuals. You're seeing people writing in a style that isn't spoiling the game for people. And this is I've definitely tweeted about how Nintendo players guides, like ones that are first party published by Nintendo, are different than like Brady Games or Moby Games or whatever the companies are, because Nintendo has an investment in not spoiling the game for you. Nintendo has an investment in not demystifying all the special things about the game. So it's almost written in a way that it's like obfuscating like finer points of data. Like, I can't see a Nintendo player's guide explaining how many hit points a boss has. They'll tell you how to beat that boss, but they won't demystify it and break it down into the code. They won't decompile their own game in order to provide like the exact way to beat a boss. You know, they won't like spoil how to cheese an AI or something like that. And I think that kind of optimism is very nice to read. Like, I have both a third-party Majora's Mask guide and a first-party Majora's Mask guide. And the first-party Majora's Mask guide actually goes a little bit more into, like, Skull Kid and, like, you know, the world of Termina and, like, how it relates to, like, the original Zelda. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, damn, that's actually pretty cool, because Nintendo probably has the license to be able to do that, because they have the access to people who can answer questions, or they just feel more comfortable in investing more people in their world. And, again, kind of going back to, like, I don't want to sound like a boomer, but it's one of those things that I think kids might be missing out on these days a little bit. You don't have as many, unless you're going to GameFAQs, or unless you're going to like IGN wikis are all right for it, because they're wikis, and you know, there's no kind of expectation that you're getting any kind of monetary compensation or whatever. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but when you're Googling things about popular games these days, it's all sites that have created like 200 different articles for each individual question.
Yeah.
And they don't, like, that's an SEO thing now, where like Twinfinite is the one site that I always notice, but like Newsweek does it. Newsweek posts things, or like real news sites now post one-page question answerers about Animal Crossing, because they know that people are looking for those questions. They'll publish an answer about Animal Crossing on how to get an axe and how to get a fishing rod, or how to get XYZ, but they'll do it for each individual question. And it's like, okay, I can kind of respect that I don't have to like watch a 10-minute video, but now I'm reading the equivalent of a 10-minute video in written form, where now I have to scroll through a bunch of things that are like, Animal Crossing was a game that came out in 2020, and you're like, yes, I know this, please just tell me how to find this fish. You know, so I'm very much a person that appreciates community effort, and even though it sounds very elitist, I'm very appreciative of people who do it for the love, and people who don't necessarily do it for the clout or money. And maybe that's a bit hypocritical, because like I'm definitely a person that stands up for people not working for free. So I don't know, maybe that's like a bit of a contradiction that I need to work out personally. But at the same time, I look at things like wikis, or fandom.com wikis, and I've noticed that they've gotten like progressively worse, where like fandom has started to put all their their own videos on top of irrelevant wikis, or like at the bottom of the page where there used to be all these like, oh, what's a popular post on this wiki, or like a popular page on this wiki, or related stuff for characters or whatever. Now half of them are just random articles about fandom bullshit that I don't care about. So it's I don't like the commodification of that kind of pure content. I don't like that kind of like cynicism that comes with, okay, we've got all these people making stuff for us for free. How do we make money off of it? And it's like, I don't know. I think that gaming and gaming culture is at its best when everyone's just kind of producing things for the love of it. And like I said, that kind of comes at a conflict with my desire for people to get paid and not get exploited. So I don't know. It's a complicated question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's 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 not sustainable though, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
If you only do it, yeah, as a love for it, obviously, but I think. But when you said like, I feel like maybe, newer generations are missing out on stuff. I don't know if it's, to some extent, I think a silver lining is in reverse. You can also be more appreciative when you do find it though. Right?
Oh yeah, of course.
Back in the day, like for like you or me, like GameFAQs was all you had. So at a certain point, like you still appreciated it, but like for instance, I'll admit it, like after the first couple, like the intense like ASCII art and all that stuff that people put into the GameFAQs, like I didn't like stop and appreciate it after the first couple of times, right? Because
Yeah.
It was just the norm. It was like, well, that's just how all of them are supposed to be. Like in fact, anytime I saw one that like didn't have it, I was like, oh, this guide sucks, and I'd like move on, and it became like a you take it for granted type of deal. So I would say these days, I mean, I feel the same way. Like these days, in fact, even for me, like if I see I mean, I think in some ways it, for me at least, since I am also, well, within esports, I'm obviously within the industry, but even with gaming, now I can appreciate both like passion projects and paid projects better. If that makes sense, since
Oh yeah, of course.
passion projects obviously still have their kind of special aspect of, they're and I think this is the same with anything, that with any, it's not even like art, like anything where sometimes it being a bit more raw and not perfect like helps shine its character through, right, in a lot of different fields. But that also obviously doesn't mean that that's the best. It's just I like to consume that as like a hobby or whatever else it might be, where you can appreciate it as like a future talent or future potential. But at the same time, now having like seen how businesses have to work as an adult, I'm like, okay, well, I can also appreciate like this paid commission or whatever else it might be. So it's, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I don't miss GameFAQs necessarily. Like, I appreciated it. It holds a very special place, but I think it's a matter of, I guess there's just more to sift through these days. And I think, but I think that'll die out after a while too. I think we live in a time where this allure of, content creation, has like bubbled up so much that everyone thinks like they can do it, and everyone just looks up the formula to do it.
Yeah.
But eventually time will tell that not everyone can do it, because for multiple different reasons, whether it's time, talent, or just there is a fixed market share because there's a fixed number of people and computers in the world. The dust will settle, and there will be some that are doing it just because they can run the business side of it really well, and then there will be some who balance it well with the passion they have. And I would assume that even to some of our listeners, it's the same way. Like, you might have certain content creators that you follow or enjoy purely because they seem to still carry that passion and they stick to it, and then some just because they're like really good at what they do systematically.
Yeah, like what I was gonna say is like thinking about that kind of exploitation versus doing it for the love, dichotomy. I was thinking, I'm like, I think the crux of it for me is that it's a pressure. It's, are you pressuring someone to continue the project for free, especially if they need that support, or are you appreciating?
Well, that's straight up exploiting, though.
No,
that's
no,
like
totally.
actually morally wrong.
I guess
versus if a like company or a content creator starts doing stuff that makes them more money, for instance, right?
No,
I think
totally.
that's the difference. I see it as like the whole like, we're just gonna straight up exploit people who work for free. That part can go for sure.
Oh no, totally. I'm more just trying
that
to
part
like,
can disappear.
I'm just trying to like parse it myself. I'm trying to like think of like what circumstances make it different from like what circumstances make it okay, I guess, or like what circumstances like enable the best of both worlds. And it's like I would never look at a FAQ artist, or sorry, artist, I guess maybe is the right word, a FAQ writer, constructor, whatever, and I would never probably
architect.
be something that I would really appreciate like that for free. I would never blame them for not being able to do it because of their own personal bandwidth or the lack of support or that kind of thing. I would never look at it and be like, this sucks that you can't do it, produce this free free thing for me because I like it so much. How dare you not? So I don't know. It's a complicated feeling to work through. And like you said, I think it's
a thing of, but that's, I think once you start thinking of it that way, the way I see it is the natural progression of that thought is now I'm more appreciative of people who are able to make money and yet keep, whether it's their like character, style, creative direction, whatever else it might be, depending on the field, because that tells me that not only did they just have the creative chops, like they had the business savvy to find a way to make their thing work. Right, which is why, and I say this as a creative-minded person, generally creative people like aren't the best like business leaders, right? Because either they go too deep into the end where it's not sustainable, or they start making money and then like they focus too much on the money because they don't know how to like adapt from it, and then they lose their own color, and that sucks for them too because it eventually the reality hits them, but. Therefore, the ones who are able to rise out of that, it's like, oh, okay, like whether it's because they found a good partner or whether it's them themselves, you're just like, okay, well, that's really cool because now you've molded the ecosystem to you instead of you molding into it. So that's the further appreciation I would have.
Yeah, it's almost thinking about like people who, it's almost part of it is also a technological thing. Like writing things in text are a lot easier than even constructing a website. And like even those earlier GameFAQs articles and stuff are all just text files. They aren't HTML files because that's probably what the site could like handle. So like, people having access to better internet and better cameras and better microphones and that kind of stuff, and that all getting affordable and not something that you had to like, ask for a birthday or Christmas present or something. People having more disposable income to be able to take that kind of risk. It's like, that's also another thing. People being able to like look at success stories and being able to say, I could kind of do that, I think. And then, maybe spawning their own project. Like I follow, the Super Best Friends. They're like Let's Players and probably one of the like better, examples of people that made Let's Playing their kind of career. And one spin-off, I wouldn't say spin-off, but one channel that's like very associated with them is a channel called Super Eye Patch Wolf. And that guy started his product because something he saw in one of the Super Best Friends podcasts where they didn't like Hunter x Hunter or Hunter Cross Hunter, Hunter Hunter, whatever it's called. So he felt very inclined or to correct them by making a video. And hilariously, because he did that, the response was so good, or he found that he enjoyed it enough that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And so he has a giant channel right now. He's done very well for himself, but it spawned from that. It's a very interesting story in terms of like how it spawned and how it, was influenced by just another channel. So the way that people arrive at the decision to make content is also very different from, GameFAQs and that kind of stuff. Another interesting anecdote is there's a FAQ for Persona 2, which is Persona Sin and Persona Punishment, or I forget what the titles are. It's a duology. It's a two-person game. It's Persona 2, but there's two games. It's Innocent Sin and Eternal Punishment. And the FAQs for that, because it's a very kind of like, it's not as friendly as Persona 3, 4, 5, and it's very kind of harder to kind of get it into, using a FAQ for it if you're a casual player and not a hardcore RPG kind of purist is essential. And apparently the guy who wrote the like the one that has like the most information, the one that has the best explanation of like mechanics and how to like actually like get good at the game. He apparently became like a born again Christian and went back and edited like years later. Like this was like earlier this year.
Oh.
He went back and like edited the FAQ to be like, this is like blasphemous, and like
Gotcha.
to just like completely moralize like parts of the game based on his new like
his new
viewpoints and that kind of
whatnot,
stuff.
yeah.
And it was just like, okay, like that's a kind of like a weakness of the system, or at least like a thing where you're making such a niche product for someone. Like no one's gonna take a shitty SNES game that is shovelware. Like it's kind of like speedrunners, right? Speedrunners will run any game, and some people will play purposefully bad games that no one else does just to say that they have the world record in it, right? But those people still have to be realistic with themselves and say, I'm not able to make like as big a career as, say, the top League of Legends streamers playing this niche game. You know, at some point you can't just play it because that's how you feel you're going to get famous. You know, there has to be some degree of passion in it, and there has to be some degree of realism there. So the reason I bring up that Persona thing is like that Persona FAQ is a very niche product. You know, no one's going to get famous by looking at really old hard games and doing in-depth FAQs of its mechanics. So for all the people that are looking at Let's Players or streamers now and thinking, oh, I can really do that, there is that conflict where you arrive with what is popular versus what do I enjoy doing, and what am I willing to like put up with. And we definitely see people play popular games to try to be a streamer at them, but they hate playing that game. So it's kind of a very weird thing where, like you said, once you hit the middle of that Venn diagram, that like bunch of circles that are like game I enjoy playing, game that is popular, game that has an audience, game that has playability, and in the middle of that circle there's you. That's what you want. But it's so very difficult in order to find that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say from my short experience so far streaming regularly, and you don't really, because you hear this a lot as a blanket statement of like, oh, you should stream what you enjoy, and it's, but you know, obviously as someone who wants to start off, you're like, well, yeah, that's cool, but what if, like you said, what if I like this obscure game that nobody knows about? It's like, I'm not gonna, like, no one's even gonna know I'm live, right? Because like exactly. that game category is gonna be so down below, and I totally get that. At the same time, I think it's more valuable to try to find, you know, you can make some compromises of like, well, okay, this isn't my favorite game or my favorite genre, but I know I can still enjoy this. And then, you know, just, you know, if you like something that's more obscure, maybe it takes more time for the discovery. But I say this because, for instance, I tried streaming Sekiro Shadows Die Twice when it came out, like as it got open to the public, as it was unlocked for the public after you installed it. And I don't do well. This is a very weird statement, but I don't do well with blades in games. Yeah. Like I just don't do well, or in movies. Like I'm just, and maybe it's because it's like, it seems extra gory than say like bullets, but I just, you know,
hey man, whatever works.
It makes me, yeah, it's just something where I'm like, it makes me more squeamish and whatnot. But I thought I loved the game mechanics of Sekiro, and I think if I had played it on my own, right, like I could look disinterested, right? I could be, don't have to talk, etc., and I can just focus on the parts I enjoy. But obviously, if you're streaming or if you're trying to make content, that's a very different story. But at the same time, if I'm going to start talking about it, I realized during that gameplay, I was monitoring my VODs, and I was like, I'm either not talking, or when I am talking, I'm constantly mentioning how I don't like that part, or how I'm not okay with it.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I want to like drive that point home of like, I actually don't like this. And I'm like, well, yeah, that sucks. Like, who in the world wants to watch someone play Sekiro and be like,
I hate this.
I don't like
this entire time.
The blood in this game. Yeah. It's like that does nothing for anybody, including yourself. And then I think that's when it hit me. I was like, that plus the recent fun I've had streaming JRPGs, where I was like, okay, well, playing through like these old games, it's like I'm like super behind. Most people on the internet know the games, but it's been fun for me. I was actually, Kingdom Hearts was one game where I was telling my stream actually just now before we started recording the podcast of, I don't think I would have enjoyed this game as much if I didn't stream it, in fact.
Oh yeah, because you get to leech other people's experience or like enthusiasm,
Yeah, I mean it's just it's an old game. Like I think the remaster is done really well, especially on the PS4. But there are things I think. The things I don't like about the game are those technical aspects, right? Whether it's like camera movement or the way like this map is laid out and things like that, where I've just gotten accustomed to more quality of life features in modern games. And if I played it alone, that could have been enough for me to be like, okay, like that's cool. I'll just like look up the last cutscenes, right? Whereas now that I'm streaming, I can, and there's plenty else that I enjoy about the game, whether it's the story, the graphics, like the cool mechanics, that I can talk about that. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? It's an old game. Like, I'll just ignore the camera aspect. And that's cool. And it was the same with Final Fantasy VII, right? There were certain things where I was like, yeah, this is freaking archaic and this is dumb. And sometimes I'd still mention it, like in the battle, like with the ATB system or things like that. But it became so less frequent that it was actually, if anything, that was now me mentioning certain negative aspects or things I didn't like added to the experience, because it was like, okay, now this is honest, but I still like it. And communicating with people who have this, completely separate and unfound love for this game, I'm able to echo the positivity back and forth rather than the negativity, right?
Oh, totally.
So it's been a very interesting experience for me, where I've found that I've enjoyed that I'm able to share this like new experience. So for some people, it's a completely new experience they're sharing with me. Some people, it's like, how often do you get to, I've realized, like, how often do you get to relive something, right? And while you're not directly reliving it, it's a very interesting way where they can be like, oh, I remember how I reacted at this scene, because you're watching someone who's literally having like the same reaction, right? People in my chat will be like, oh my gosh, like this is how I reacted, or like I was the same way, or like I couldn't play anymore after this scene, I had to like put the game down, like things like that after it passes. So it's been a very eye-opening experience of, okay, now this is something I can get behind and share that experience. And RPGs, the reason it became RPGs is just because they have extensive stories.
Oh yeah, of course. And I think that going back to that top point that we had about very niche games and like starting out a streaming kind of like career or whatever, there's a difference between streaming as a hobby and streaming as a career. And like there's people who will stream those extremely niche games, and because they just like it and they know that that's what they can talk about and that's what they can speak from the heart about. Like for me, I've always wanted to start like a very long play multi-session like Dragon Quest VIII playthrough, and I know that I can talk my ears, like people's ears off about that game and make it entertaining, even though it's an RPG and it's a very classic RPG, so you've got a lot of encounters and a lot of kind of grinding at times. But I guess that's the thing, is that the person who is very like considering what a stream is as a product versus someone that is just picking up OBS, hitting live, and just wanting to play for other people in their small community or whatever. It's like half of my friends in my Dota stack really liked or like had Twitch channels and streamed to like one or two people just because they wanted to not have delay for people in my stack to watch them. And now that Discord has that the streaming functionality, they just don't stream on Twitch anymore because it's a lot easier to go live for Discord, because that's what their function is, so to speak. It's not to get a product and to get big and get donations and a sub button. It's just to, do that for the love. And I'm not saying that one is more superior than the other or one is more pure than the other. It's more of that, like we said, technology is just getting more.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if, I don't think in that case the difference is like the passion, but more so like you're just looking for a different experience, right?
Oh, yeah,
one is like to in some ways to like recreate the whole like playing at a friend's house or type of experience and talking about what's on both of your screens, versus one is you're trying to create a broadcast, whether you're trying to make, because I only say that because some people will also try to create a broadcast even though they're not trying to make necessarily like money off of it or a career, right? So So I wouldn't say the difference is necessarily a passion thing. It's more being aware of, like, just, what type or what is that content fulfilling? Like, is it just strictly because you want to, like, talk about your gameplay or have something to watch together or whatnot, versus is for some people their passion is creating a broadcast, and then some people they actually want to make it a career, things like that.
Yep. But no, I'm happy that you're enjoying the game, and it's like the only thing that I really disliked, I disliked two bosses in that game, and I think that you'll get to them eventually. One's the like second to last boss, and then one is I think the third or fourth to last boss. So as you get there, I don't know. We'll talk more maybe next week about Kingdom Hearts specifically, but it's always fun to talk about this kind of stuff because like part of my job now is I moderate a creators channel in the Chill Hop Discord, and a lot of it is these kind of conversations. I love these kind of conversations because it's talking about like the nitty gritty and like trying to understand how we take an industry that's based off selling the authenticity of something and how to, like, I don't want to say manufacture it because that sounds like hollow, but understanding why these things like tick and like why it works for us is always like an important thing for me anyway. Will, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me streaming on Twitch and then often talking on Twitter, both at Will Chobra, WILLCHOBRA. I also have an Instagram, but I usually only post like short stories now and then. But feel free to follow me there as well. Streaming, I usually stream almost every day of the week. Usually Wednesdays are kind of my go-to days. I take breaks, but if other things such as my work with the T1 show or something conflicts, obviously things change. So for all those updates, you can find me on my Discord, which is linked both on my Twitch and Twitter account. And my stream is usually around, it starts in the evening around 6 to 7 p.m. Korea time. Please keep that in mind.
I was gonna say
I usually stream
KST
through the night.
Cool. No, you can find me at mattd.cc. That's all my relevant links. If you're also a Twitch streamer and looking for cool music, you can check out chillhop.com/creators. That was a project I launched a couple weeks ago in terms of making our music more available for people, and it's gone really well. Talking with other people and trying to like make them aware of that kind of service is always just like very rewarding because like people like our music and it always really helps. Otherwise, I'm not really doing too much in the way of streaming or content. I'm probably going to be ramping that up in the next little while because I'm going to be doing some stuff for work. But I'll mention that when it gets a little bit more relevant. You can check out our podcast on gmncast.com. You can also check out our subreddit. We usually have threads for feedback or comments on each specific episode. Last week's episode is a little late. I'm going to be getting that out today, hopefully along with this one, on like Spotify and iTunes and all that kind of stuff. But for all the people, watching us live on Twitch, we really appreciate it. You can usually find me, like I said, at anything that's relevant is usually Matt Demers, MattDemers. Will, do you have anything else you wanted to drop before we say goodbye?
No, not this week.
Cool, man. I hope you have a good night.
And I hope you have a good morning.
Cool. I will try. Have a good week, everyone. We'll see you next time.